Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Staff roll call.
Attendance noted.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the June 23rd meeting.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Okay, this is an opportunity for citizens in the audience to address the commission for items that are not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the first item. We have 4 public hearings tonight. The first item is to consider a request for an amended conditional use permit and variance for the South Education Center at 7450 Penn Avenue. The amendment and variance would allow the school to add a soccer field to the vacant land between the school building and Penn Avenue. Staff.
Thank you. Intermediate School District 287 operates the South Education Center at 7450 Penn Avenue. The City Council approved an amended conditional use permit for a new school facility back in 2006. District 287 has applied for a conditional use permit amendment to allow construction of a new recreational soccer field, walking track, and an accessory building. The 150-foot by 210-foot field would be smaller than a full-size soccer field and intended for younger players. The facility would be shared with the Richfield Parks and Recreation Department. A conditional use permit allowing both an educational facility and a daycare at the site already exists. While a conditional use permit runs with the land, significant changes in the circumstances or scope of the use require an amendment to the original permit. Significant changes may include, but are not limited to, hours of operation, increase in number of employees, expansion of the structure or premises, or major operational modifications. The construction of a new recreational soccer field is considered to be a significant change. In the single-family zoning district, schools are a conditionally permitted use. One of the conditions of permitting schools is that outdoor recreational facilities designed for group activities are set back at least 40 feet from any lot line. The applicant is proposing to build a youth soccer field surrounded by an asphalt walking track. The proposed soccer field meets that setback requirement. Along with the field, the applicant is proposing an accessory structure to store groundskeeping equipment. The applicant is requesting one variance related to the fence along the southern perimeter of the soccer field. The zoning code states that no fence more than 4 feet in height shall be constructed forward of the front line of the principal building. A 6-foot fence is proposed along the southern perimeter of the field to prevent soccer balls from leaving the area and creating a hazard on the nearby trail and roadway. Strict enforcement of the zoning code would cause a practical difficulty for the applicant. Locating a soccer field, accessory building, and associated fencing on this site is a reasonable use of the property. This property is a through lot, which means it has frontages on both Penn Avenue and Sheridan Avenue. The South Education Center facility was built on the western portion of the lot out of necessity, as a former public school building stood on the area now proposed for the soccer field. It is not possible to locate the field in another location on the property. These unique circumstances were not created by the applicant, and therefore staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit amendment and variance. I believe the applicant is here to answer any questions you may have, and that concludes the staff report.
Okay, first of all, any comments, questions from the commission? Okay, could I just ask one question that I have? The 6-foot fence on the south portion, was that staff's recommendation or was that the applicant's recommendation?
The applicant proposed that fence for the reasons stated, to prevent balls from leaving the field and entering the trail and roadway there.
Okay. Okay, is there anyone that wishes to come forward and speak to this issue? It's in a public hearing, and this is your opportunity. Okay, seeing none. I have just a comment. I am a little leery of this one, although I think it's a great use and a great attribute to that piece of property. I'm not sure that a 6-foot fence is enough. And the part that really bothers me the most is the part on Penn Avenue. That is really, to me, as busy as what it is, and the ability of some of these kids to kick a ball, even if they are kids, it gives me the impression that we're asking for and waiting for an accident to happen. So I'm kind of concerned about that piece of it, and I wonder if staff had any comments or suggestions relative to that.
So the field itself is over.
We asked for them and no one came forward.
Good evening. I'm Mark Kushnerk. I'm with TSP Incorporated.
I'm Michael Cowles. I'm the Facilities Director for 287.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Woodward.
What I'm wondering about is the rationale behind this, why that particular location, how much use is it going to get, how necessary is it for that student body?
I can speak to that. That is the currently we have a requirement for physical activity for the kids. Currently, with the current property that we have really only indoor use that we can use. This is intended for a wide variety of activities for our students. Walking, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have a program where many of our kids use a large tricycle, basically to get exercise. Currently, that's done indoors. That would be brought outdoors to that track where they could go around the track, circle the track. There'd be team activities, which aren't possible right now with the facilities we have. So it really opens up our ability to really provide better physical activity program for the kids.
About how many students would be participating in this program?
Well, there's a total of about 400 kids at this school. I'm not sure you're aware of District 287, intermediate school district. We got about 400 kids at the school. Majority of those kids would use this at one time or another.
So-
I don't know numbers off the top of my head, but I'd say 75%,
Okay, so about
At least.
300.
about 300 probably, right?
Okay.
And this would only be used during school. We don't have teams, team sports after school, sort of thing. And then in off hours, in the summer, that would then be used by the city of Richfield.
Okay, so it could possibly be from April through October would be a use for this particular field, so an awful lot of traffic along that field as far as soccer games. If the city is going to use it, will be used for league purposes.
It's- Well, it's actually I'm sorry, what's the
It-
technical
it's-
term?
It's considered a U11, which is youth 11 years old, so it's not a regulation size soccer. So it would be for the younger age, not be used for big competitions.
Okay, but even if it's used for youth, it's going to be used
It
for
would be
several
used,
months throughout the year.
and it would be up to the discretion of the Parks and Rec.
Okay, have you had discussions with them?
Yes, we have. I don't recall the names off the top of my head, but yeah, there is an agreement in place with the city of Richfield, or we will have a formal agreement in place with the city of Richfield to use that when we're not in session. So it'll be our field, but it will be basically for use by the city of Richfield outside our school hours.
Okay, so if that's the case, again, just to restate, I'm anticipating that you would be using it from April through middle of June. When the weather gets warmer, when school lets out, they would be using it from the middle of June through probably middle of October, end of October, depending on the weather
Correct.
and league schedule. So there would be an awful lot of use of this field. It's not just going to be an occasional couple hours
No,
a day
no,
during the school hour.
correct, that's right. In fact, I'd say that, really by use of the field, I would suggest that, or I would guess that would be primarily used by the city of Richfield.
Okay. All the more that makes your comment and skepticism or concern, I think, all the more important, Rick.
Okay.
That this is going to have a lot more use than just casual recreation time.
Yep, that is right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Good jobs.
Have you considered this at all as far as the Penn Avenue side of this, as far as traffic and the possibility that that ball will go flying into Penn Avenue?
We had looked at that, but with the zoning ordinance, it wouldn't allow us to go above 4 feet. We are willing to do that because I know the Parks and Rec brought that up as a possibility. And that's later on. And it's just a matter of where is it going to be kicked from that would.
Just one
But we
second,
also
Mr.
have,
President.
we got all the boulevard trees and stuff that will be in place along there as well. So that would provide some additional protection from balls flying through.
Staff, did you have a comment before I go to?
I did, Chair Jabs. So this application, like all of our applications, went to our administrative review committee, and that includes a representative from Parks and Rec. In this case, it's Jim Topitzoffer. And Jim has reviewed the proposal. Actually, I believe the field is being built partially with grant funds from the Three Rivers Park District, and that's partly why they'll be sharing. Is that, correct me if I'm wrong?
It's Hennepin County.
Hennepin County, I'm
Yep,
sorry.
Exactly. It's 50% matching grant.
Right. And so Jim's been involved with this. Hennepin County's been involved with this. Jim has reviewed the plans. We did talk about the height of the fence at those meetings. Our take on it at the Administrative Review Committee meeting was this was probably going to be enough. And if it didn't need a taller fence, we would prefer not to have it. The applicant and staff were willing to try it out and come back if something needed fixing. If that's not something that the Planning Commission and City Council are comfortable with, if you'd rather have that protection up front, that's certainly something that I think the applicant was willing to install now. It's just a matter of the variance. I think that you could craft the variance language to allow a 6-foot fence where necessary, and then it could be changed based on what is needed rather than coming back again. That change could be made at administrative level.
Okay. Commissioner Kitzberger?
Oh, that actually addressed my question. I was trying to get a sense of the distance between the playing surface and this fence, and then the distance from the fence to the road.
Sure,
'Cause
I can
I'm-
answer that question.
I mean, I'm guessing for an 11-year-old, it would take a concerted effort to get the ball over the fence and then to the road.
So the fence itself is 27 and a half feet from the
Okay.
the boundary of the playing field, and then the roadway would be 53 feet from the boundary of the soccer field. The field itself is 150 feet across, or 150 feet wide, so roughly 1/3 the distance of the field.
Sure.
Again, out to the roadway.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments? Tom?
Have any idea what the height of the fence is along the boundary softball field at the junior high, at the middle school? Okay. I'm thinking that it's higher than 6 feet, so we have a precedent where we have something higher there bounding 75th Street.
You know, without looking at the site plans, I can't speak to the specifics of the other fields, whether or not they were granted variances. I don't think that anyone here is saying that we shouldn't put a 6-foot fence up if it's necessary. I think aesthetically, if it's unnecessary, we would rather not have it. I think that is what everyone is trying to balance here.
Okay, other comments? Gordon?
I think particularly given that it's gone through the staff review process and a fence isn't going to dramatically drive up enjoyment, and given the applicant is willing to put up a taller fence in the event it becomes an issue, I think their interests are aligned with the communities that, you know, nobody wants to see balls go out into a roadway, but softball and soccer being two very different sports, the likelihood of that happening is a little lower than a game where the intent is to hit the ball in the air. I guess I'm inclined to follow staff recommendation.
Anyone else? Okay. Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion and a second. Okay, well, I'm still not convinced. So I have reservations. I'd rather see it safe than sorry. And although I know that, 6 feet might be good or might be good, I'm not even sure 6 feet some occasions is good. Kids will be kids, and this age group is, they're kids. And there's the ability and sometimes just the desire to kick a ball out of a field. And I think that I don't know, I've had kids, so I guess I kind of know that. So I think I would personally be rather, like I said, safe than sorry. And so at this point, I would have to vote no if they don't have the 6-foot fence on Penn Avenue.
I'm comfortable with the 6-foot fence. I like the idea that they've discussed that they would put something in, and that is how I'm interpreting what you said. Should it be necessary, I'm thinking of temporary netting that would go up, that could even be higher than 6 feet, but it's netting that goes up and comes down. Yeah, my concern is that this is going to be several months during the year, April to end of October, round numbers. It's not just going to be an occasional use, but a concerted use. I do have confidence in Mr. Topitzhofer's assessment. However, I would be willing to support this and grant the variance to have a 6-foot fence if necessary.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll call the vote.
So I guess, Chair Jabs, I'd like to make the motion before we
Sure.
vote. I guess I'll move staff's recommendation, but I think Commissioner Rubline's idea is a good one, to allow the applicant to utilize temporary fencing or temporary barriers in the event, given that we're trying to have the granting of a variance that is inclusive enough to allow staff some flexibility, that to allow for the 6-foot fence, but then also in the event that fence height becomes an issue, allow temporary barriers, provided it can be worked out with staff.
So can you restate that for me? So I'm sorry.
I move staff's recommendation with the additional proviso that the applicant can erect temporary netting in the events that fence height becomes an issue, with the nature of that to be worked out with staff on an administrative level.
Okay. Okay, that's the motion. And there was a second. Is there a second to that?
Susan Rosen.
Susan, second. Okay. Motion and a second to approve that. Boy. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you. Oops, sorry. Consider a request for an amended conditional use permit variances and an appeal for Fireside Pizza at 6736 Penn Avenue. The amendment and variance are related to a request for approval of a 1,074 square foot building addition, parking and setbacks. The appeal requests relief from odor control requirements. Staff?
Thank you, Chair Jabs. The owner of Fireside Pizza, Rich Thompson at 6736 Penn Avenue, has applied for a number of land use approvals in order to construct approximately 1,000 square foot building addition. The addition will create a new entrance and lobby off of the existing parking lot and a new kitchen at the rear of the building. This will increase the overall size of the building by more than 50%. The work will also include a complete remodel of both the interior and outside dining spaces. This property is zoned MUC, Mixed Use Community, and it's within the Penn Avenue Corridor Overlay District. The property is considered legally nonconforming in regard to a number of code requirements, like building setbacks, parking setbacks, landscaping, and also odor control. The code allows for expansion of legally nonconforming buildings in this district through review and approval of a CUP. That is so long as the expansion meets a number of specified criteria. Additionally, restaurants serving alcohol are a conditional use in the mixed-use district. The applicant will be applying for a full liquor license later this fall. Staff is supportive of the applicant's desire to renovate and improve his property. However, the purpose of the zoning code is to help balance the need of the individual with the neighborhood. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit and the setback variance to allow the expansion, with the condition that the applicant secure agreements related to the additional required parking. Staff is recommending denial of the applicant's request to add cooking equipment that will intensify odors without adding an odor control system. So that is our recommendation there. I'm just going to go through a couple of the elements that are included in this process. There are a lot of requirements, many checklists when there are so many applications involved. Those checklists are all included in your packet in the documentation. I'm just going to hit the highlights here. First of all, I'm going to talk about parking. There are currently 22 on-site parking spaces. The existing restaurant requires 22 spaces and is therefore in compliance. The proposed addition of 1,074 square feet increases the total number of required parking spaces to 29. If the council grants a variance of 2.6 feet, the 2 on-street parking stalls immediately in front of the building could count toward the required parking. Staff does believe that the criteria necessary for granting a variance are met in that case, and we are recommending approval of that variance. If the on-street parking stalls are counted toward the parking requirement, the applicant remains 6 spaces short. Included in your report are also a couple of comparisons from other nearby jurisdictions of what the parking requirements in those areas would be. A conditional use permit cannot be granted if an expansion or modification of a legally nonconforming building increases the overall site-wide degree of nonconformity. Parking is arguably the most critical issue for this site and for this entire area, the entire Penn Avenue corridor. This required finding is not supported if the building area is increased by over 50%, but additional parking is not secured. The applicant has a number of options related to parking. These are included in the ordinance. The first option is shared parking. The code allows property owners to share parking in certain circumstances. The applicant must demonstrate that because of the hours, size, and mode of operation of the respective uses, that there will be adequate parking available to each use during its primary hours of operation. That parking agreement must also be protected by covenants that run with the land on both lots. The applicant has submitted letters from adjacent property owners to both the north and the south, that's Penn Auto Care and Richfield US Gas, indicating that they would be willing to share parking. Pardon me. Staff reviewed plans. We reviewed the site plans for both of those locations and found that they did not have surplus parking. Penn Auto Care has exactly the number of cars that they need, and while in the overnight hours there were occasionally on observation 2 to 3 spaces available, that wasn't, those weren't going to be guaranteed because cars are towed in overnight, and often Penn Auto Care needs all of their spaces. The gas station was approved with 4 spaces, and although people do park on other spots on the gas station, those are not legal spaces and cannot be counted toward the requirements. So staff recommends that the applicant contact additional nearby property owners with either excess parking or dissimilar peak parking demands to discuss possible parking for restaurant employees. The second option that the applicant has is a variance. And in light of the above facts, where he submitted those, the notes from the adjacent property owners that didn't work out, the applicants requested a variance based on the fact that the seating capacity of the restaurant will not increase. However, the overall occupancy of the building is going to increase from 131 occupants to 143. Staff and the city attorney agree that it's not possible to grant a variance in a case where the applicant is creating the situation which makes the variance necessary. If you recall, one of the conditions necessary to grant a variance is that you cannot have created your own hardship. And in this case, where you're putting on the addition, you are in fact creating the issue. There's an issue of there's an option of a parking study. The applicant could submit a parking study showing that he doesn't actually need this many parking stalls. It is staff's observation that Fireside Pizza does a great business, and we believe that they do need all of the parking stalls that they have. And then this isn't really an option that would help the applicant right now, but going forward on Penn Avenue, the council and planning commission can direct staff to continue to look at reductions in parking, to direct us to, consider parking standards more like Minneapolis. And there will obviously be a trade-off. We've talked about this many times. There's a trade-off between allowing business owners to expand their businesses and improve their sites, the trade-off being that parking will likely spill into the adjacent neighborhoods. Staff is certainly willing to consider or to look into that, to look into what those reductions should be. What are what are reasonable reductions? And I think that if you direct us to move that way, that we could craft a stipulation for this applicant that would allow him to find the necessary parking to meet the code now, but delay recording of that. So delay any actual legal recording on either his property or another property until we see what these parking reductions will be. And if he is in compliance, once the council approves reductions in perhaps the Penn Avenue corridor, 66th Street, areas like that, then he would not need to record anything, and that lease for the additional parking spaces could expire. So that covers parking. Moving on to odor control. The zoning code requires mitigation of environmental effects, including odors that will be detrimental to the comfort of surrounding properties. City practice is to require that restaurants or food preparation facilities which use intensive cooking methods, such as deep fryers, baking ovens, grills, and ranges, and are adjacent to residential uses, install odor control devices. This is similar to rules administered in Bloomington and Woodbury. While existing restaurants are grandfathered and not expected to install odor control after the fact, like any other nonconformity, intensification or expansion triggers compliance. The proposed changes bring the physical kitchen and related exhaust features closer to the residential property behind it. It will be approximately 35 feet from the nearest residential property line and less than 100 feet from a single-family home. And also will be, the proposal adds fryers to the kitchen. Based on city ordinance and past practice, staff has determined that an odor control system is required. Over the past 25 years, the city has dealt with numerous complaints from residential areas about odors from adjacent restaurants. During that time, staff has consistently applied this standard. In the past few years, a number of restaurants in the city have been required to install odor control systems. Examples are Pizza Luce, Miyama, Andale, Lin 65, El Tejeban. City code allows an individual to appeal the decision of the community development director if he can demonstrate that there has been, and this is a quote directly from the code, an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by the director in the interpretation or enforcement of the code. The applicant, Rich Thompson, submitted an appeal on August 4th, and that letter is included in your packet. The applicant has stated that he has received no complaints in the past and that his location in a low to moderately dense area makes the addition of odor control unnecessary. The applicant has also stated that the cost of installing this unit is prohibitive and that the requirement is overly stringent. This part is important because it's a little bit different than a lot of the approvals that we deal with. If the council believes that the community development director has erred in determining that the odor control is required in this instance, they must approve a resolution finding that the odors will not be a nuisance. The resolution must include supportive finding. This is the important part. No conditions or stipulations can accompany this type of approval. So this is not like a conditional use permit or a variance where you can attach quote unquote reasonable conditions. If you and the council believe that the standard is not being applied appropriately and an error has been made, you must approve it carte blanche. Okay. If the restaurant is sold and a different type of food is then prepared on site, we would not be able to go back and say, this is a nuisance. You have now declared that it is not. One other thing to note here, because of the numerous requests and options related to this proposal, we have not prepared a draft resolution. Our thinking was that we would take the recommendations of the Planning Commission and draft a resolution for council consideration based on those. So that concludes staff's report. The applicant and his team are here tonight if you have any questions for them. Otherwise, staff will stand for questions.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Questions of staff, first of all, from the commission? Yes?
In the letter that Mr. Thompson has submitted, he states that during the time he's owned the business, he has not had any complaints of odor or anything like that from the surrounding neighbors. Is that accurate? Do we have anything on record?
I am not aware of any complaints.
Okay, so this has not been an issue or problem for the neighborhood that you know of, or that has officially been brought to your attention?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Question I had was, you state in your summary that you have, they go from 130 some to 100, is that what it was?
Yep, 131 to 143.
Yeah. How does that, what brings that about if no seating changes?
Sure.
Right.
Occupancy is based on the building code, and there's a certain calculation. It's primarily based on
Square footage?
there's a seating component, and then there's also a square footage component. So there's the lobby is still counted as being available for people. Bench seating is divided, fixed seating is divided by a certain, I think it's 36 inches. Every 36 inches is counted as a seat. And so it's a different calculation than just counting chairs.
So basically, it's the square footage that determines the people? Is that basically it?
It's closer to a square footage measurement, which is what the zoning code does now too. The zoning code bases parking requirements for restaurants on square footage instead of seating. We moved away from seating a number of years ago because, at least from a zoning perspective where we didn't have measurements like every 36 inches or something like that, it was very difficult for us to monitor. Someone would come in with a plan showing that they had 12 seats, and then you would go in the following week and there were 24. So we moved to a square footage measurement.
Okay. And then the last thing, I note that the outside seating does not come into play when we do these calculations. So does anything change relative to the outdoor seating as far as numbers?
The outdoor seating is doubling.
Outdoor seating is doubling.
But I believe that is when we calculate, and I'll have to ask the applicant to be sure. My recollection is that even when you count the doubling of the outdoor seating, almost an equal number of seats are being removed from the interior space. I think the difference is 2 seats.
Okay. Okay. Does the applicant wish to speak to us at this time? If so, step up to the podium and state your name.
I'm Ed Noonan from Noonan Construction, the general contractor.
Barrett Engelhardt from Sherritt Design, architect.
Rich Thompson, Fireside Pizza.
So we're here to answer any questions. Melissa did a wonderful job presenting the city's viewpoint on it here. If you'd like to talk further about parking, odor control, we're happy to answer any questions or share our thoughts on it.
Okay, questions? Tom?
Relative to outdoor seating, although I understand somewhat why it doesn't affect things, but your outdoor seating would be available from what month to what month?
It's very hard to judge
Sure.
here with our climate and the weather that we've had these last 3-4 years. There's an example. The things to note on it is that we're widening the public sidewalk there. That's there currently. We also are adding landscaping, barriers, and decorative planting along this here. Make it more visible from Penn Avenue here, more attractive. The outdoor seating here, you can't base the business in Minnesota surviving on the outdoor seating. How many hours of a day do we actually get to enjoy? It's not too hot, you don't have mosquitoes, and you do have road traffic noise out. So it's just to appeal for those few hours. The strong point that we have with parking or with our seating capacity here is we haven't changed it. If you go into the booths now, this restaurant's been in place since 1960. Rich has owned it here in the 90s. And as I even sit in there, and I know as with age I expand here, it's hard to sit there in those current benches and seats there. What we're doing is just making a little bit more generous space. One way of calculating it is, as you say, Melissa, by the square footage and using a 36-inch rule. What we're doing to the building with the addition there is bringing it up to ADA. You will have handicapped accessible restrooms there. You'll have a handicapped accessible entrance to the building here. You'll have a vestibule, which doesn't exist right now. We're going to have an enlarged kitchen, which Bloomington was very receptive on for health and safety standards with that. Back there, we're adding a fire system, suppression system to the building. It doesn't exist now. So a lot of what we're doing is housing these other needs here. We're not increasing the seating on the restaurant here. He's making a major investment back into the community here. He's got options to take this business to other communities that would welcome this opportunity here, to have someone like him with this type of a name and history to follow. He's dedicated. He wants to give Richfield the chance with this here. But without increasing seating, I don't think this is a hard decision, in my point of view here, for the investment that he's going to put into this here. His return of opportunities could be greater at another opportunity site.
Okay, other questions? Susan?
Yes. Yes. Regardless of how anyone individually feels about how parking should be measured, our code measures it based on square footage. The square footage says that a restaurant of this size needs additional parking. The applicant's options are to apply for a variance, which, as I mentioned, I discussed with the city attorney, and we don't believe is a legal option. It can't meet that criteria. The hardship is being created by the applicant. So the other options are shared parking, or perhaps temporary shared parking and an ordinance change. They have been granted variances. The record is a little spotty. The last time changes were made when wine was added to the business, and I don't think Rich was the owner at the time. The parking requirement should have doubled. I don't know what the justification was. Like I said, the record is spotty on why that parking did not. But based on current standards, his current restaurant meets our code. Going forward from here, the options are shared parking or perhaps temporary shared parking with an amendment to the ordinance at some point in the future.
What's unique about this business here is not only with the employees, but also with a lot of the patrons, that this is a neighborhood restaurant here. You have a lot of people walking here. You can see that the bike requirements, they have 2 bike stalls here. They've got people that bike or walk to work here. It's a lot of local people right within that 6-8 block radius here, both clients and employees. Some are long-term employees here too. These projections for employee needs here are with the growing business if it were to grow. You know, that we'd be a max of up to 12 employees here. That's been a very limited amount of hours there. Right now, Rich, you're getting by with 2 employees.
Yeah. Susan, a lot of our people bus to work, and the ones that don't will park in Penn Auto Care's lot because they're closed down. Otherwise, on the street down a little further. but they don't park in our lot.
And these are certain hours.
Yeah, a lot of my employees right
walking.
now take the bus to work. But you're not always guaranteed that. No.
I do.
Yep.
Have you explored parking?
Sorry, Tom, staff was next.
I just did want
Oh,
to
I'm
add
sorry.
one thing. There is a reduction included in the parking requirement because of the frequency of transit in front of this business. So there is a 10% reduction already calculated into this. So, you know, from staff's perspective, we have looked at every option for reducing the parking requirement under code allowances.
Can you repeat to me then, and when this is all said and done, how many parking spots do we have as compared to the 22 now?
They're proposing 21.
Yeah.
If the variance is granted for the setback, they will have 23 because they can count the 2 on street, and they're required to have 29, so they will be 6 short.
Okay. And do we allow anyone else in the city to include on-street parking as part of their parking?
There are provisions in the code that allow you to count on-street parking. You have to have a primary front door coming out onto the street, and your building has to be within 20 feet of the street. That's why we're suggesting the variance for the, I forget the number right now, 2.6 feet, because I believe the building is set back 22.6, or maybe it's 40. Something like that. There's a distance that your building has to be in relationship to the street, and the front door has to be on that street, and then you are allowed to count those stalls toward your requirement.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Rublin?
Relative to the parking, have you explored parking cooperation with the building north of Penn Auto Care? I believe that's actually a vacant building at the moment.
I don't even own that property,
Okay.
so no, I haven't.
Okay, and what about the building then north of that? There are some vacancies there as well, the building that holds Hope Silver Spoon. They seem to have a lot of parking to the south of their
Yeah.
of their building.
I've seen that, and they got signs posted, no parking.
Sure, but asking if whether or not you've explored any kind of proposal with them for.
If I knew who owned it, I could contact them.
Okay.
Yep.
So far, you just proposed with the gas station, but I don't care.
Right.
Excuse me?
Just with Penn Auto Care and U.S. Gas.
Okay. Well, I would encourage the other to try to explore it with the other. Now, there is parking north of, on the street, north of Penn Auto Care, and also in front of the buildings that I was just describing. Can they include that as on-street parking that would resolve some of the issues?
Customers can certainly park there if other businesses are closed. They cannot count it toward their parking requirement.
Okay.
The issue, the way that the ordinance is set up, it gives you some allowances for on-street parking, but it doesn't want to double and triple and quadruple count the on-street parking. So if we were to give this applicant credit for all of the on-street parking on Penn Avenue, and then another shop owner comes in and wants to open up, and we give them all of the credit for all of the parking on Penn Avenue, you can see what happens. So the ordinance is set up to allow you to count what is directly in front of your property.
Okay, relative to the business that's occurring at Pizza Luce, I would have to say that their parking lot, especially on their busy nights, is inadequate. So somehow or another, our calculation, if it's just based on square footage, does not always work. In this case, and this is my opinion, this applicant is not creating all of this problem by themselves. The structure of the buildings along Penn Avenue are very precarious. There just is not enough parking along there for almost all of the businesses, with the exception probably of CVS and the Arc Value Village. They have very large parking lots, but everybody else the buildings across the street, where Pick and Parlor is, that's all diagonal, one level or one depth parking. It's kind of hard to manipulate. That's just the way that those properties are laid out. But nonetheless, we're between kind of a rock and a hard place here. If you're talking really hard numbers, we can't create any more land. And we've got a business who wants to expand and thrive. We've got to be able to do something to resolve this.
Well, in my opinion, you got a solution. All you got to do is walk down the street and talk to that other lot, and you've got it settled. So I think staff needs to make sure that Rich gets the names of the owners of that property so that, in fact, we can put that in place, because I don't think we want to create a situation where we're deviating from what's going on.
Sure.
So this is an opportunity to meet new friends and take care of the situation that exists as far as the variance.
In all due respect, Rick, too, Rick, what we're asking for is
Could you
not
speak?
just
I'm really hard of hearing.
I'm sorry, I appreciate that, Rick, that recommendation here, but what we're asking for is just not a casual handshake and say, yes, you can use it. We're asking for a covenant to be attached to the property, which is a lot more of a commitment from a total stranger to a fellow business owner here, knowing that it's going to transfer with the land. So I own a lot of commercial property, and I would take this very cautiously myself if I was approached with a covenant. If it's just a casual agreement, yes, for 12 months and we can renew it annually or something. So I just want to make sure we all understand what type of a burden here we're putting onto both landowners here.
The word expansion has been used so many times, but it's really not expansion. We have to expand the building to bring it up to code for the restrooms, for the kitchen. Our seating is going to decrease from what we have right now. So, I know that you guys got to go by square footage, but who's going to eat in the vestibule or in the kitchen or the bathroom? Nobody. But them are the spaces that we need to bring up to code,
Tom,
and that's why we
let
need to
the
expand.
applicant talk, please.
No, that's it. So we're not expanding, we're not adding seating. We're actually decreasing the seating. But we're expanding because we need to bring our restrooms up to code, we need to bring our kitchen up to code. So that's where the expansion word is kind of, you know what I'm saying? Sure, we're making the building bigger, but we're not going to have as many customers in there at one time.
Okay, Commissioner Rublin? Okay, thanks. Okay, so on to another topic. Can you talk a little bit about the situation with the smells, et cetera? And I know you gave us a letter, but need a little clarification on that for myself, at least to understand where it's all coming from.
Sure. Well, under the current just pizza oven itself, would that not require an odor control in today's standards that are required by Bloomington, Richfield?
Yes, if you went in today with a new pizza restaurant, you would be required to put in odor control. Yes.
I believe correctly, just to look around the surrounding communities here, Edina, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka don't have the same requirement. So here again is an existing business from 1960, now is updating it here, and we're asking for odor control because he has a pizza oven. Now, will the menu expand here? Yes, it needs to expand. He's got to increase his hours of operation here to try to stay in business and offset this improvement cost of $500,000 to $750,000 he's putting into the building here. With that would be some fryers. Probably that seems to be a food of choice today. Adding breakfast here, lunch they have now, and dinner. But picking up the extra breakfast here. So the pizza oven we're saying requires an odor control. If we add a fryer here to expand the menu, which we've submitted a menu sample that's at his other store, we're just asking here again, it's a financial burden. An existing business that's operating just fine. He does nothing to it. We don't have to increase parking. We don't have to increase odor control. We don't have to change health and safety standards here because we're grandfathered into it. So we're trying to be reasonable here on this. We're not asking for the moon on it here, but it's an existing business that you want, I would believe, in this community to continue to survive here. It's not a new business coming in here. 40 to 50 years in the making, same name.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Anyone else who wants to come forward and speak to this?
Pat Elliott, 6720 Oliver Avenue South. I'm within the zone of required mailing. I would first speak to the odor controls. I've never smelled anything from any of the restaurants, whether it's Silver Spoon, Fireside, the Chinese restaurant, or anything else. So I don't see that adding one fryer is going to create any nuisance problem for anyone in the neighborhood. The second thing is, and more importantly, in the handout that you were given, there's a section B called critical issues. And I'm just going to read a couple of the comments that are in there that were put in by staff and suggest that not only the commissions, but maybe the city council needs to pay a little bit more attention to the critical issues that the businesses on Penn Avenue are facing. The first one reads, the zoning code incorporates a number of measures to help existing non-conforming businesses and structures in the mixed-use districts to improve and even expand. That shouldn't be a guideline. It shouldn't be a suggestion. It should be a mandate if, in fact, we're going to give any truth to trying to improve and revitalize Penn Avenue. The second one is reinvestment in existing properties is key to the success of the community and the Penn Avenue corridor. I would like you to just keep those in mind when you continue this discussion and come to a vote on what you may or may not be able to do to keep Fireside on the Penn Avenue corridor, and give a sign to everybody on that corridor that we're willing to work with them and try to move forward so we can revitalize Penn, like the guidelines that were put out 6 years ago anticipated happening. It hasn't happened to date, and I'm not saying that our codes or our ordinances are restricting it, but they're certainly creating a barrier for people coming in, looking at a property and trying to figure out how they can take a 50 or 60 foot by 100 foot lot, put something on there that's going to be successful so that they contribute to Penn Avenue and to Richfield community as a whole. Thank you.
Any others? Any other questions? Okay. Have a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Discussion.
So I think maybe if we take this in pieces, it might be a little bit easier. Perhaps starting with the front setback variance and address the issue related to those couple of stalls that are there. Just be my proposal that we chunk this up a little bit.
Okay. Go ahead.
I move that we approve the variance to adjust the front setback to allow for those, counting those parking spots that are in front.
Okay. Second, or motion and second. Just any discussion?
Yes.
This is just he's actually dividing
Yeah.
question 1 into 2 as well. Okay.
Okay. Discussion? Okay. Let's go with that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Okay, next.
I think the next piece is one where we've really struggled. We've had several study sessions for the last couple of years on trying to balance the issues related to increased property utilization and parking requirements. You know, we're stuck between first ring suburb rules and suburban aspirations. I think it's been really challenging as we've had more infill development and more property improvement. And it's a space where, you know, unfortunately we've got an applicant who's been put in the position of the collective body, the city council and planning commission, not getting parking rules adjusted. So, you know, I think staff's suggestion that construction be provisionally allowed if parking can be found is probably a good one, but that's putting an applicant in the position where they're crossing their fingers and hoping that city council ends up finding in a way that's favorable to them. Otherwise, they've got an expanded non-conforming use that potentially can't have an occupancy certificate.
I would just like to add that the language in the staff report was specifically said if the council directs staff to further reduce parking. not, originally that language was to consider further reductions. No, we don't want to do that to the applicant. We don't want to do that anymore. If the direction of the planning commission and the council is that parking standards on these key urban corridors like Penn Avenue and 66th Street are not appropriate, and we should look to Minneapolis, we should look to St. Paul, we should look for urban standards, we want you to direct us to further reduce them. So will the applicant be required to do anything? I don't know. Perhaps we would reduce them where he would only need to secure three spots. Perhaps they would be reduced to something more similar to Minneapolis. A restaurant this size in Minneapolis, as you recall from your report, required 8 stalls, and then he would have surplus, and he could rent to others. So if that is the route that you want to go, if you want to direct us to move in that direction, I want to let you know that you are directing us to move in a direction that we are going to propose reduction.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that we've discussed at all of our study sessions is the community in general prepared for the blowback for people's possessive interest in that space in front of their house, whether it belongs to them or not? I know for a fact public safety gets calls saying my neighbor's parking in front of my house, make them stop. So we're, you know, it's true. So parking is, community attitudes about parking are the issue here. And we don't know where we're going.
I agree, and I think what you've got is, I mean, at this present time, I mean, I live right by there, Tom lives right by there, we know, you live right by there. You know, I've seen overflow parking and it doesn't seem to disrupt anything. But this is one particular situation, so I guess we gotta make sure that we're good for all, so it leads me to the conclusion that the study should be done and addressed to find out what we really should have to make it a viable space to have a business in. And I think that's kind of where we're at. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think the issue is one, given that we are an administrative body that makes recommendations to city council, how would it be advisable to pass this on to council without a recommendation? Given that the rules we've been given to apply, there is no way to apply these rules and allow for the exception.
Well, if I may, I think what we do is we recommend that they do the study and leave it at that at this point. And do we have to do anything relative to how they exist at this point then, if we do that?
No, you don't have to do anything in terms of how they exist. What you do have to do is recommend something on this applicant's proposal. Staff's recommendation is that you recommend approval with the stipulation that they find the additional 6 spaces and secure them. Since you are also giving a recommendation that staff further reduce parking standards in these areas, I think that we could craft the stipulation of the resolution to say that the applicant has to secure 6 off-site spaces temporarily for some set period of time, perhaps a year, 18 months, and have a lease. Show us a lease. You don't have to record anything on the properties. This is a temporary measure that will perhaps be addressed by the ordinance change that comes forward. That is what staff's recommendation is in the report.
Okay. So, comment? Susan?
Right, and you have, this part that you're approving is the conditional use permit. So you craft the stipulations. It's separate from the odor control where it's a yes or a no. Yep.
Yeah. And it's something that's going to reoccur along that avenue just because of the geography. It's just, these numbers are just impractical along Penn Avenue in that area. I would support Commissioner Vizecki's proposal on this. And as you stated, with the
we got to know
stipulation.
how he addresses the the off-site parking as such. What is your proposal for that?
Well, I was discussing not moving, although it was
No,
long-winded.
I think you're onto something. I would go with it. But we have to be careful because where it is practical and where it is possible to meet parking numbers, it should not be interpreted that because this is being allowed in a specialized area, those reductions need to be in place in other areas. This is where we have to be careful. And as you say, it's like there's a, how shall we put it, there's a entitlement to parking spaces sometimes. But I think that we have to be careful. This is probably one of the thorniest issues we've had for a long time.
And, I think Chair. I think ultimately, one of the most challenging issues, or one of the things that this does, is in the event that we do reconsider parking intensification in these spaces, it actually puts an increased burden on prospective businesses moving into the space. Too high utilization businesses, as we've seen in some areas in the community, you get a couple of intensive parking utilization businesses, and there are challenges that come with that'll ultimately end up going into site selection. But I guess I don't want to short circuit discussion, but I'm ready to make a motion if there isn't any.
Make your motion.
So I'd move staff's recommendation that applicant secure in the interim period an agreement for 12 months or potentially 18 for the 6 additional spaces, and that City Council examine increased parking density in economic development areas, particularly Penn, but I think there are others as well.
I would second that.
Okay, and so what kind of agreement, discussion, what kind of an agreement does that have to be, so that, I know that there was some concern on the applicant's part as far as that agreement. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Right, so staff's recommendation is intended to alleviate that burden of having to record something on both of the properties. We'd be looking for a lease agreement, a copy of a lease agreement signed between the two parties. There would need to be something in writing that staff could see that says that you have secured these spaces, but we wouldn't require them to take it to the county and record against either of the properties. And I've discussed that with the city attorney, and I think everybody at a staff level on the city side is comfortable with that interim solution.
Okay, any other questions, discussion?
Yeah, I just have, I'm going to support Gordon's amendment and everything, but I'm just really concerned about this reducing or increasing the density in parking. I mean, we have to take care of our businesses, and I respect the fact that it's been around since the 60s, but we've got neighborhoods. We've got people living there, and they live there. They have rights too, and and the parking, to depend on the streets in front of homes for parking is not the answer either. I mean, we've all been to places in Minneapolis, and you look around and you think, how do these people live here with all this coming and going? And I'm not so sure if I want that for Richfield. I live in that part of the town, and we have alleys, and we have a lot of street parking from residents there. And so I am going to support the study because I do think it's an important piece to this. But I am really skeptical because I really want to protect our neighborhoods. And it's the people that live there and call this place their home is the ones that I really support. So anyway, I will support your motion, but I just, like I said, I'm really skeptical of any study.
Okay. Yeah, and my comments too are about the same. I still am, although I've never seen a real drastic issue there, I think that it's important that we at least take care of that portion and have the overflow parking. just because of the neighborhoods. I agree with you, and I think that's key to me. So even though it imposes a little bit of a issue for the applicant, I think it's important that we have harmony amongst the neighborhoods and business, and that's a big piece of it. So, okay, any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries. Okay, third item then.
Okay.
You got it started.
Obi-Wan.
No,
You're on a roll
it's not my
here,
show,
man.
not
You're
my
on a
show.
roll.
My concern about odor control is one that in the event that we end up overturning the director's position on the interpretation of the underlying ordinance, we, to staff's point, set up a situation where at no point in the future, despite any use, can we come back and say it's a problem. I'm being involved in business, am tremendously sensitive to the investment that would be necessary to make it work, and that it is sort of the rules that the rest of the community follows, and recognizing that it's a significant investment. If it weren't a situation where we'd be overturning, the staff position and creating a situation where nobody could complain ever in the future about it, I think it sets up a situation where we do have a potential problem. And I don't think we should be in a position of discouraging community revitalization and reinvestment, but creating a situation where nobody can ever raise an issue going forward, particularly when there is a shift. I mean, understanding pizza ovens being one thing, fryers being totally different, and we've already had a couple of instances just as a planning commission where there have been fryer complaints and food complaints. And I'm not saying that that's an issue here, but I don't know that we want to create it. So I'm significantly more conflicted about odor control.
Okay. Staff, I have a question relative to other businesses that have been in the same situation. In other words, kind of grandfathered in relative to location, not really changing location, and yet then had to adapt to the to that type of odor, fixing, let's say.
Sure. We don't have an exact example like this. We don't have a case where it was an existing business and they were expanding and putting in different types of equipment. What we do have is old restaurant spaces that were converted into new restaurant spaces and then required to add odor control. El Tejeban is one instance of that. If you remember, it used to be Eastern Buffet in that shopping center. Eastern Buffet had been gone for a number of years, and a new restaurant came in. All the CUPs and everything had expired. They came in for a new one, and they were required to add odor control. That's the closest example, similar situation that I can think of.
If I'm not mistaken, though, in that situation, we had some citizens that lived around, or residents that lived around there that also had some issues with the smells already, and were actually complaining about it. Is that true?
That's correct. The neighborhood behind the shopping center had concerns. I believe their concerns, if I recall, and Matt may have a better recollection of this, were about trash smell and noise.
Yeah, that's correct. It seems the bulk of their complaints regarded late night activity, noise, trash collection, late hours, less so than the odors produced
Not
from
odors,
cooking.
okay.
There was, though, if I recall correctly, a long-term resident who recalled a burger place being there and having issues with the fry oil, but from a different time, perhaps with lower elevation ventilation.
Okay.
But I do recall we had discussion on that, and we did almost prophesize this kind of a discussion. At the time, I believe the applicant for that restaurant also thought that it would not be a problem in the future. And I believe our discussion was, it's hard to, again, grant you use and then come back and later on make you do something. So just what you were talking about, it's hard to create this situation. I'm very conflicted about this as well. The language that you have here kind of gives us not a whole lot of latitude.
That that language is not in there to be difficult. That language is in there to represent the legal requirements of making this decision. I just want everyone to be clear that if we do this, these are the ramifications for this property. I think that, you know, odor control as a policy is something that the city has the power to change if they don't believe that the odors from restaurants are a nuisance. I would say that our experience at a staff level doesn't necessarily support that, but it is not every restaurant that garners complaints. Some of them go in and you know, you can smell that restaurant for 3 blocks and no one ever says anything about it. It's fine. Other ones really bother the neighbors. So, you know, it's a policy decision at that level. On this level, on granting an appeal, if you grant an appeal, or the council, if the council grants an appeal, you say that it's not a nuisance and you can't come back. That's the reality of one.
But are we saying that it's not a nuisance for this specific application restaurant? If another restaurant goes in there with a different menu, can we then, does the city have the mechanism to come back and say, no, this menu is going to be a problem and you have to put in the scrubber?
We do not.
Okay.
The findings would be that the proximity of these types of the cooking equipment used and the proximity of the building to residential does not create a nuisance. And so, you know, once they do this kitchen expansion, they're pretty much going to have all of the kitchen equipment that most places would have. And so you're not really going to get a lot of equipment change coming in with a new restaurant. There's just not going to be the support. You have to find that it's just not a nuisance. And maybe that is the feeling of the Planning Commission.
Could I ask, does Silver Spoon have those restrictions as far as odor control?
They do not. Silver Spoon went in prior. But if Silver Spoon wanted to expand into an additional amount of space and add different types of cooking equipment, these same requirements would come up because residential is right behind.
And the same thing with the Vietnamese restaurant that's across the street from there. I don't believe that they have anything right now.
No, they don't. Another recent example is Miyama on 66th Street. They were required to put in odor control. That was actually a site where the neighbors did come in and talk about a previous restaurant where the odors really bothered them.
What about Ada?
Ada does not, because they are not adjacent to residential.
And then one thing that you point out in the staff, or was pointed out in the staff report, is the fact that because the building is expanding closer to the neighbors, that there is a feeling that there might be more of a, you know, impact.
Right.
So is there any mitigation that could take place relative to that new equipment that wouldn't require them to put in the $40,000 for the odor abatement as such?
You know, staff has done some research on odor control systems, but this is not our area of expertise. The people that we have spoken to in the industry, our discussions with them haven't led us to knowing or finding kind of a middle solution. Either you put in the scrubbers in the system, or you don't. There are filters and things like that, but their purpose is not to reduce odors. It's to catch grease and things, as I understand. And so I don't know of a middle ground here.
And there's no avenue as far as the grandfathering of the current place relative, because it's the new equipment that kind of brings you forward and says that the odor is going to change and therefore it's the problem. Is that true?
That's true. It's a non-conforming use that is expanding and intensifying.
Mr. Chair? Could I ask the applicant to come forward?
Who
Again, please?
would you want? Rich? Or
Rich, please. I'll put you on the spot. Okay. As you can tell, we're conflicted about this, and we're trying to be compliant and yet at the same time accommodating. Can you offer us any kind of compromise on the type of equipment or odor control or something that, I mean, can you think outside the box for the moment and just see, is there something that would meet the requirements but not be as onerous cost-wise?
There's no, it's black and white. There's no middle ground for this. You know, do we get any complaints from Sandy's with their burgers and fries? Had any complaints from the neighbors?
I am not aware of any. I also don't take those complaints, but I'm not aware of any.
You know, when you're talking, and $40,000 is where it starts. That's not going to get the job done. It's going to probably be upwards of 50 to 60, and then you're talking another 50 to 60 to put in a sprinkler system. Where other places that I've contacted already have both in place, that saves me $120,000 right off the bat when I go into remodel and relocate. So, you know,
Okay,
$120,000 isn't peanuts.
No, it isn't.
No, especially in this world.
In your experience in the business, food preparation and so on, do you anticipate or can you give us some guidance on the type of menu changes you're going to entertain?
Well, you got a copy of the menu, right?
Yeah, but I'm asking you for your experience. Would these kinds of changes, or if you've done them in other locations, have they produced a problem? Have they produced noticeable odor that people would get knocked off their feet a block and a half
No.
away?
No.
Okay.
But you never know. There could be that one person.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Well, like everybody else, I'm struggling with this, and I guess the point is, I guess the biggest point to me is that what's good for one is good for all. And although we don't have any case to put this into place except for this one, if Hopes decides to do something different, or you know, whatever it is along the street decides to do something different, no matter what, you're still in a quasi-residential area. And for me, I think I got to go with what's here and recommend to the council that they stick with it as well, because I think we're going to otherwise set a precedence that dictates for every other business that's there that does food is going to have the same situation if they upgrade and whatever. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it's set up at this point. So I can't see going against it. Other comments?
Quick comment. So this is my second meeting, so there's a lot of excitement here for my second meeting. So I live about a block and a half away, so I'm one of the frequent walkers to Fireside. So my husband and I really enjoy the fact that it's in our backyard, it's easy to get to, it feels like a community place where we see people we know. So that's one side of it. The other is, you know, I'm thinking about people who live on Queen, so who really have, you know, their backyard sort of abuts Fireside, and so how this would affect them. So that's what's, in addition to, you know, me enjoying really good pizza at Fireside, I'm also thinking about them if I'm living on Queen and playing in my backyard, and whether or not I might, you know, have some impact that way. So those are the types of things that I'm trying to balance in my own mind, so I just wanted to let everybody know sort of where I was at the moment.
Just to clarify, there were no responses to the mailing. No resident had a comment or at least an adverse comment about these changes and so on. They were informed of
That's correct. Public
Nobody whose
notice,
property backs up to Fireside's property?
public notice was sent out, including to that property, and we did not receive any comment.
Okay.
No.
So there have been no, to summarize, there have been no complaints to date of odor problems. There have been no no comments. Can I also ask if you know whether or not there have been complaints about Silver Spoon or the Vietnamese restaurant across the street?
No, I don't know of any complaints about those restaurants either.
Okay.
Gordon?
I have a question for staff when she's done with Mr. Elliott. So I guess one of the questions I'd have for Melissa is, given that the current status is an appeal from an administrative decision, and we're being asked on the administrative decision, to the extent that we wish to have flexibility outside of the administrative decision appeal in the event that the administrative decision is denied?
I'm sorry, you lost me.
Yes, I tend to do that. I saw that glassed over look and knew right away that there was trouble. So in the event that our recommendation to council is to deny overturning the administrative decision, what avenues would the applicant have for an alternative restriction from an odor control perspective? So, and I'm only thinking, so, for example, within the context of a PUD, planned unit development, there's a lot more discretion in what it is that can be done for a particular property. My true concern is that in the event that the administrative decision is overturned, from now going forward forever, nobody can ever complain about that site, no matter what happens. It's a pretty weighty decision, and weighing that permanence against, albeit a valued community partner and somebody who's investing, against $40,000, you know, where does that weigh out? And it's the permanence that I think is my greatest struggle. So are there alternatives if we don't overturn staff's decision?
Alternatives for the applicant.
Yes.
Right. So Councilmember
Elliott?
Member Elliott just brought to my attention that we are in the process of setting up a study session to talk about odor control regulations. This is because, as you may or may not be aware, there was recently an appeal related to the adult daycare that wanted to go in along Penn Avenue, and they wanted to do cooking and use woks and other intensive cooking methods, and staff decided that staff's decision was that they needed odor control, and there was an appeal. That appeal was withdrawn, as the applicant is moving and will not be opening that business. But in light of that, and in light of this, staff is going to come forward at a study session and talk about where the city wants to go with these odor control regulations. So in terms of alternatives, I think that tonight you can you can go with staff's denial and recommend a denial of the appeal based on the fact that it is permanent, like we've discussed. However, I think you can couch that recommendation in support of continued exploration of alternatives. And, you know, the problem for this applicant is this applicant wants to move now. And you're going to design, these systems aren't really designed after the fact. You have to design the roof to hold them. You have to design the screening for them and all of those things. You know, if the applicant feels that they can work around those things, and then perhaps there's something to be put in there that says you could do this after the fact, stipulation that says you will install odor control if it is determined appropriate after further study by the city council. That's the only alternative I can see.
Could we hear from the applicant relative to that, please? No? You can't be done? Nothing to say? What does that mean? It can't be done, or? Okay. I think there was asking if there is, well, restate your preface again.
Well, sort of. We're saying we can give you this approval if it's decided that you need to put odor control in at a later date. You're going to need to put odor control in at a later date. No promises. So yes, we're not, I mean, there's no way that, without,
So at this point, they
this
wouldn't
permanence
have to
that
put
you
it
can
in.
say.
You'd have to leave the ability to do it if in fact it's decided, based on the study, that it is necessary or not necessary.
right, you would have to deny
Yeah,
the appeal
yeah.
and put it in, but allow there to be some grace period to install,
What-
perhaps.
So in effect, you wouldn't have to move ahead with it at this point, but you'd have to leave the possibility of accommodating it if
Right, you'd have
necessary.
to build your systems to accommodate adding it on, and make sure that your roof could handle those loads and you could screen it and all of those things.
Okay. And just one more question I have, just in case. I thought somewhere in the document that you had said that Bloomington and Eden Prairie have similar, have those already, is that true?
Bloomington and Woodbury administer their odor control requirements in a similar manner. You know, we talked to Edina staff. Edina does it more kind of an after the fact. If there are complaints, they'll make you retrofit in some way. And that was the case, I believe, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, St. Louis Park administered in sort of the same way, after the fact, complaint based, you have to add it.
Okay. And then, did you have a comment?
A couple of thoughts to share with you here. One, I'm not a gambling person. I don't go out to the casino and say, okay, I'm going to do this and gamble that maybe I'm going to have to spend another 40 to 60,000. Melissa's correct in saying this has to be in the early planning stage, architectural drawings, mechanical drawings, structural drawings, that you're anticipating this system in here. I don't see it something that you can just add into later in the development of the plans here. Second of all here, I understand what we're trying to do as a community here to control orders and response from the community here. This is not a mixed-use site here. We don't have a restaurant with housing above it or housing adjoining it here, which we try to cover under a group code here. Edina had it at 50th and France here. We had Salute Restaurant, we had the Edina Grill, and we had the condos, expensive condos that went up at 50th and France there. They had a real hard time coming in after the fact. They added the odor control here, but that was different. Housing was adjacent, it was above it and kind of to the side of it here. This is a freestanding building here. It's been here since the 60s. Yes, everybody was notified within a certain footage here coming if there's a complaint here. I'm sorry to hear that we don't have a mechanism here to say if you do have a complaint, residents, come to your council. Express to your city members here that you have a concern here. I don't understand this. You never can come back to it attitude at all in this day and age here, and it'd be better spoke to with maybe the city attorney here to see what the rights are as a citizen, because I want to know as an investment in a landowner and a business owner, if something isn't right, that's what city is for. You come to them, you express your concern. We're in a small community. We're not in a big city of Minneapolis or St. Paul here that is a lot more diluted. But I think this being a freestanding building here, it's kind of all or nothing. You take it right now and plan it into it. In this case here, I don't think the applicant would go ahead with this project, my feeling. Budget's important here in this here. This is a small piece of land here. There's only so many hours with a certain type of food. We're saying if he just continues with pizza because he's putting handicap bathrooms in and a fire suppression system in, he's got to have a scrubber on it. That's what the code says. We can talk about fryers and other type of food being added to here, but the pizza oven alone, with his mainstay of businesses, is not being allowed.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
Well, we're either being asked to roll the dice or the applicant is being asked to roll the dice is what it comes down to. I guess in the interests of advancing business along Penn Avenue, and I've been an advocate of that. I guess I'm willing to roll the dice at this point that this particular suppression system is not going to be necessary, but it all the more points out that we've got a lot of homework to do on these kinds of ordinances, and I believe that you and I actually agreed with that when we did the restaurant installation at where Eastern Buffet was, when that question came up. We hear about this frequently from residents, where some business goes in, initially it's not a problem, then it becomes a problem, and it's very difficult to go back. But in this case, I guess I'm willing to take the chance.
I don't know. I'm just, yeah, I know, back and forth here. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't the case. Unfortunately, I think that we're put in a position that we can't, if we allow one to do it, we're going to have to allow others. And if Hope comes and asks for it, or whoever it is, it's going to be the same situation until it's resolved or remedied relative to that thing. I was, hoping that we could buy the time and actually fit it in somehow that they can work into it and make work. I want the business to continue. I want it to expand. I want it to improve. But I'm kind of caught between two rocks here. And I got to think about the community as well, because I have no idea what's going to happen when you move the rest, some of that building closer to the neighborhood, and what happens at that point. And why do I want to put that out there when we already have something in place that says this is the way it is and has to be for the betterment of, again, business and community, or residential, I'm sorry. So, I have to lean towards the denial at this point, with the hope that we can have that discussion further and make it happen. So, other comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think I'm probably the only one up here that's not conflicted. I would recommend denial. I am concerned about the neighborhood. I'm concerned about the fact that this is a precedent that we're setting here. I think we have to really be cognizant of that and worried about what's the future. I mean, I'd like to see Penn Avenue. I agree wholeheartedly with that it's a business, but my main concern is the neighborhoods and what impact. We don't know, and if we don't have that way to change this, I have lived through, when I was on the city council, I lived through some smelling. It was not a restaurant, it was a candle making place. But it was really hard because of the neighbors and what they had to deal with, because they changed some of their processing, and it was a mess. So I would support denial, and if there's a way that a study session can be done in a later time, so be it. But as I said before, we are a community of neighborhoods. We have businesses too, but we are neighborhoods, and we have to protect those.
The only one I haven't heard from is Mr. Kitzberger. Comments?
Really not much that hasn't been said already. I mean, the fact that I'm weighing a couple things. There haven't been complaints. The folks in the mailing area whose property abuts the back of Fireside aren't here, and that's not to say that they wouldn't have an issue. Perhaps they missed the mailing, whatever. I mean, there could be other circumstances, but I think I'm wondering if perhaps, I mean, I'm not one to call into question the expertise of staff, but perhaps in some sort of provocative way, this was put in, the requirement was made to put in odor control as a way to facilitate this discussion finally taking place among the Planning Commission and hopefully among the City Council. Because for me, I think I can live with upholding his appeal and recommending that the city council do that, but the concern for me, I think, has been stated before, is the permanence of it. And so I'm wondering, you know, what it is we can do to facilitate that being addressed as a planning commission at this point, if anything. I'm inclined, and I would hope that, you know, the counselors present tonight are paying attention to this and would at some point, you know, work pretty diligently to address that so that our hands aren't tied in the future. So I think at this point I'm with Tom in that I'm, you know, as a planning commissioner, willing to roll the dice at this point.
Okay. Just a point that
as
this
much
did,
as it is rolling the dice.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a point that this did come up at the last council meeting, as Mr. Elliott had expressed, or how they came through. So there was the same situation which asked for a study. So, okay. I guess at this point, oh, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a
Sure.
quick question? So, our options are really twofold then, right? Just either yes or no. And if we grant or the appeal, I'm not sure of the exact lingo, but thank you. There's no recourse for the city whatsoever in the future.
Correct. My
And-
discussion with the city attorney, specifically regarding the previous appeal, was that in this type of situation where it is not any type of conditional permit
Right.
or variance, you can't attach conditions. So you either decide that this should have odor control, or you decide that it's not a nuisance. Just on its face, a restaurant here, a restaurant this close to single family, it's not a nuisance. And so you can't come back later and say, oh, never mind, it is a nuisance. You'll have findings, there'll be a resolution saying, these are the reasons we decided this wasn't a nuisance. To come back and change that later, at least in my discussions with the city attorney, is not possible.
And that's just because of our ordinance or our...
It's because, I don't know if there's a different way to craft this to say that, I don't know, if you put odor control as a condition of a conditional use permit, would your options be different? I'm not sure. That's something that we can explore with her. The way it's set up now, that isn't
I
an
just wanted to
option.
confirm. Okay, thank you.
And that is certainly something that we will look into.
So, and just as clarification, the ordinance of the states right now says they have to have the odor control. So therefore, they did the appeal, and this recommendation in here is a recommended denial. So we approve that the denial is status.
Correct. The ordinance
Yeah.
now states that you have to mitigate odors in such concentrations that will be detrimental to the
Makes sense?
surrounding area.
Okay. Okay, so I would ask for a motion.
How do I put this? I would make a motion that we do not support the staff recommendation as stated here, but rather allow the expansion to go forward without the additional odor control.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, call a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Nay. How many nays? Four?
Four.
Okay. Okay, ask for a motion on the recommended denial. Motion.
You good?
I make a motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it for further discussion and vote.
Any discussion? Motion and a second has been made for the denial, a recommended denial that's in the staff reports. Any discussion? Gordon?
So, you know, again, my concern is the permanence of this. I would certainly, from a planning perspective, support a conditional use permit for the space that provided certain accommodations for odor, which is, you know, I guess the way that I would have hoped to have seen this come forward rather than an appeal from an administrative decision, because that would ultimately give not only city council leadership, but also planning the flexibility to address issues in the event that they would come up. I think a conditional use permit is the way that this should actually come forward, and I would certainly support it in that context.
But because it's a, correct me if I'm wrong, but because it's a non-compliant property that is making significant changes, this comes into play not as a conditional use permit, is that correct?
It's actually two separate issues. It is a legally non-conforming use that is asking to expand under a conditional use permit. But the odor control requirements are not part of that conditional use permit. They are just a performance standard, and in order to be relieved of those, you have to appeal the decision of the director.
And again, so I would support some type of modification to the odor restriction as part of a conditional use application, but I mean, it's a procedural technicality, but unfortunately one that the applicant is suffering from. But the fact that it's coming up as an appeal that would have the permanence that comes with this is really concerning.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? Okay, hearing none, let's call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Opposed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to the next topic.
Oh, pardon me, Chair Jabs.
Yep.
Just as a point of order, we did not actually vote on the recommended denial of a variance for the reduction in parking. You approved the conditions as part of number 1, but nobody officially moved recommending denial of the variance for the
So
parking.
moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you.
And then I'm just going to ask another clarification, Melissa. So at no time can they come back and ask for a conditional use permit, so that we can deal with this in a different mechanism?
For the odor control?
Yes.
Well, you're not the final decision on the odor control. You're just a recommending body. So we'll certainly talk to the city attorney about whether or not there are options that we haven't explored. And I don't know if that can be done in time. We certainly can't get ordinance changes in place before the city council meeting. But if there are ordinance changes that should be made that would make this a more manageable provision in terms of the policymakers, then perhaps there is some way to work that out.
Is that something that can be done within their time frame?
I don't know. You know, but if they're wanting to do construction this fall, again, we're in that spot where in the time to get an ordinance through and approved and talk to everybody about it, you're rolling the dice.
Okay. I'm sorry I introduced that term.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the next public hearing is consider a request for a major amendment to the planned unit development for Lindale Station development at 66 on Lindale. The amendment will consider details of a third building to be constructed at the southwest corner of the property. Staff? Use
permit for the Lindale Station planned unit development. The original approval included the now constructed LA Fitness and retail building and a conceptual third building. For that building was a restaurant, and it was placed at the southwest corner of the site. If any significant changes were made to the design of the third building, the developer was to return to the city with an application for a major amendment. Lindale Station LLC has submitted an application for a multi-tenant restaurant/retail building with a drive-through coffee shop at the north end and a sit-down restaurant at the south end. Retail and service users will likely occupy the additional tenant space. An additional significant change to the proposal is the request for an accessory trash building. That's contrary to current city regulations. The proposal includes a continuation of streetscape elements that were installed as part of Phase 1 and a creation of a public plaza space to include the family statue, which is currently located at the intersection. Staff is recommending approval of these changes based on agreed-upon limitations related to the drive-through tenant and the offsets proposed by the developer in place of interior trash facilities. Once again, this application, a number of review criteria apply, and so I'm just going to cover some highlights for you. Drive-through facilities are conditionally permitted in the general commercial district. One of those conditions is approval of one of the conditions of approval of a drive-through facility is that queuing space not interfere with parking or traffic circulation. You should have received, when you arrived, an additional couple of items of paper. There's an email from Jeffrey Wurst of Caribou Coffee, and also a site plan, a sketched site plan. I'm going to give you a minute to read that. It has to do with the length of the queuing space and the placement of the order board. So I'll give you a second, and then I'll continue. Okay, has everyone had enough time to look that over? Okay. So in terms of queuing space, staff believes that during most times of the day, queuing will not interfere with traffic circulation on site. However, during the morning hours, there's potential for longer lines. That said, morning is not the peak time for most other users on this site, and any congestion will take place on the site rather than on city streets. In the email that I distributed, Caribou Coffee is looking for some specific flexibility related to placement of the order board. City regulations require that there be 70 feet of stacking from behind the order board in here. And as you'll note from the email from the Vice President of Real Estate with Caribou, over the years, they have found that a shorter queuing space behind the order board and a longer queuing space between the window and the board is preferable for their circulation patterns and their particular distribution. In these types of situations, much like parking for fast food restaurants, staff has tended to defer to corporate standards. Much like McDonald's knows how many parking spaces McDonald's needs, I would argue that Caribou knows more about the requirements for their particular drive-through than our ordinance. And so I think staff is supportive of that recommendation. We do recommend that there be a little leeway given in there. We'd say around 50 feet is what they're proposing. Just based on where the walkway is going to come through the site, we want to make sure that staff is comfortable with where those cars will be queuing up in relationship to that walkway. Moving on, staff has also proposed and the developer has agreed to a stipulation limiting the use of the drive-through to coffee tenants. Should the coffee tenant leave, the developer must return to the city for an amended approval to allow any other user to operate the drive-through. So technically, another tenant, another retail or service tenant could move into that space and not operate the drive-through. But if another user who wanted to use it that was not coffee wanted to utilize drive-through, they would need to come back for an amendment. The next item is trash and recycling facilities. Our code requires that those facilities be designed into the interior space of new buildings. The developer has stated that in the process of negotiating a lease agreement with Caribou, concerns related to an interior trash room in this size building have emerged. The user is concerned that the proximity of the exhaust and intake systems could lead to odors from the trash room being entrained back into the building. Additionally, the developer is in need of additional trash space to accommodate the needs of LA Fitness. In exchange for the creation of an accessory trash building, the developer is proposing a building that will be partially camouflaged by an enhanced transit shelter, plantings, and a public plaza. The building itself will have water and sanitary service to provide for cleaning and a powered exhaust with a small staff to reduce odors at ground level. Staff research, just so you know, staff went and toured trash rooms to review this. Staff research indicates that the largest odor producer in trash rooms is grease. Therefore, the developer has agreed to install overhead grease supply and disposal lines within the building for restaurant tenants. No grease will be stored in the accessory trash building. Further, the developer has agreed to enter into a maintenance agreement related to this structure in particular. As part of this agreement, the developer will escrow funds that will allow the city to have the facility cleaned if a problem occurs and they do not address it within a reasonable time frame. City staff has had many discussions with the developer related to this issue, many discussions. Staff believes that the stipulations proposed right now are sufficient to manage the proposed facility and that the enhanced transit facility and plaza offset this departure from code requirements. There are a couple other minor variations from requirements that I'll just quickly go over. There are a few places where the proposed building and streetscape elements don't meet required setbacks. However, this is in keeping with the rest of the development as it's built. A maintenance agreement would stipulate that the developer is responsible for the maintenance and repair of those items. A development identification sign is proposed for the intersection of 66th Street and Lindale. The sign doesn't meet the 5-foot setback. However, the placement makes sense in the context of the development. And again, there'll be maintenance agreements in place to make sure that everyone knows it's the developer's responsibility to maintain those. There's one spot adjacent to the drive-through menu board where the city's minimum sidewalk width requirement isn't met. At this point, the sidewalk narrows from 8 feet to 4 feet. And this might change a little bit now with this flexibility that we're offering Caribou, but right now the pinch point comes down to about 4 feet. That does still meet ADA requirements, and so for just this one minor variation, staff is okay with allowing that reduced sidewalk width. Here's odor control again. Due to the proximity of the residential units, odor control will be required for the restaurant. A burger restaurant, My Burger, is proposed for the corner slot at 66 in Lindale with outdoor seating. The developer has acknowledged that requirement. And parking will continue to exceed allowable maximums. The required parking for the site is 350 stalls. 400 were constructed. The proposed amendment will reduce the stalls to 395. So again, they're still above maximums, but I think everyone has watched the success of this site, and so at this point, that's not a bad thing that we're exceeding. The two substantial changes to the proposed amendment are the addition of the drive-through service and the construction of the accessory trash and bus shelter. Everything else is fairly similar to what you saw initially in 2011. David Bergstrom from Wellington Management is here tonight, and also, I believe, a rep from Caribou Coffee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so first of all, any questions from Commission to staff. Okay. Any questions to the applicant? I have one.
Bring it.
Relative, I think you've taken care of just about everything. One concern I still have is the traffic through the lot to get over to the Caribou as such. In other words, if you come off of 66th Street, have you considered how that will flow through? I just don't want another hub situation where people are driving across lines and whatever, so I'm kind of, what consideration you gave to that?
You know, our thought was they would be coming in on the drive off of 66 and probably head down toward LA Fitness and then swing back around to get into the entrance area for the Caribou drive-through. I'm sure there's always going to be somebody that, you know, tries to jockey around, and you know, that may end up having to get additional directional signage, you know, depending as how it flows once we get it open to see how it works.
Okay, I can live with that, I guess. I think it's important, only from perspective of making sure people know where they're going, and I think it's pretty evident when you come in, but just a thought. Other questions? Susan?
I think I have a loud enough voice everybody can hear me. But is this just a drive-through, or is it going to be a sit-down like any other Caribou? It's
Well,
like
it's a drive-through and a sit-down.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
and you're only going to have room for 5 cars in the drive-through at a time? Is that what you're thinking, or?
Jeffrey, you might talk to this better.
Okay.
Sure. Hi, Jeff Worst with Caribou Coffee. Typically, a new Caribou location, our design for at least the last 4 years, has 5 car space between the order window, or excuse me, the delivery window and the menu board order point. And it has to do with how the pace of preparing the beverages, customer engagement to keep the line flowing. So the queue that has been designed for the location, based upon, I'm going to estimate this because I don't know the actual number, but based upon an assumed 20-foot length for a vehicle, I think there's somewhere between 7 and 8 until you would end up poking out into a drive aisle.
Okay, so you're counting on cars then before they even get up to the order window. I mean,
The 5 goes from the 5 that is being referred to goes from the order window to the order,
to the
or
pickup.
excuse me, the delivery window, the pickup window to the order point.
Okay. I'm just thinking about, I know a competitor of yours that I have go to a drive-in, and there are times when there's 10 or 12 cars behind the order window, not even up there yet. But they have a lot of space because it's in a parking lot over on France Avenue. And I was just thinking about, you know, we don't have that kind of space. And Caribou is a really popular place to go, especially like you're saying in the morning. Do you think this is a problem? Do you think that we're gonna have people, you know, stretched out on Lindale, coming from 66th and going up? I mean, it's I can just see. I'm just telling you, it's just an experience that I've had going through drive-ins, and then, you know, just eventually just giving up and just going in because it's so slow going around. But this is the only issue that I have because of my own personal experience of being in one of the drive-ins, and we just don't have that much space to go like we do in the parking lot that I go to.
So our operating experience would say that in some cases you can get long lines. I think given who our customer is and kind of our focus on customer experience, we find in most locations that it's unusual to get a line that long.
Okay.
In that, you know, our operators, and I'm on the real estate side, not an operator, but they refer to it just as line shock. You know, people pull up and most people, such as myself anyways, would prefer to run in rather than wait in a long line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it varies depending upon the location, but you can probably count on an average of around 3 minutes or so per customer to traverse through the line. And so people do the quick math, kind of like waiting for a car wash in the winter. and, they'll make the decision to pull over
To
and
run
run
in.
inside. Now, for me, a few years ago when my kids were younger and I had 2 car seats in the back of the car, maybe I would sit in that line. But today, I would not have, as a customer, any interest in doing
Well,
that.
Caribou has a drive-in off of Penn and 80 over by Southtown, and that seemed like a really small
Near Penn and
space.
American, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a lot smaller than the one on France that I'm thinking of. So, okay. Well, I'm kind of glad to see it happening, to tell you the truth. So,
Thank you.
so hopefully would work. I think people will get used to following the lines and probably not doing like Rick's concerned about over by the hub. But no, this looks like a really good thing for Richfield.
Other questions? Okay, ask for a motion. Oh, wait, we have to close the public hearing. A motion to close it?
Is there anybody else in the audience who wants to speak?
Oh, there is. Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate that.
Okay, you have
Could
to
you please
come
come
up.
up to the microphone and sign your name and tell us your address, please? Name and address.
My name is Elaine Olson. I live at 6600 Pleasant Avenue at the Oaks. My concern is the traffic over there. My other concern would be the trash. Where is this trash going to sit? Now, you were worried about odor control for Broadway Pizza or Fireside, whatever it was, but what, are we going to smell that too? You know, that's really a big concern for all the people that live there. We get all the traffic in that parking ramp right at Houlihan's. We get all that traffic, and now we're going to get all more and another burger place? You know, Richfield needs something besides burger and pizza places. They really do. Thank God we've got Lynn 65 now, but we need something else besides a burger place. And I would like you to really consider this trash, where is it going to be? Because I don't think I want to look at a big trash building. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Staff, could you reiterate
Sure.
on the trash situation
Sure.
again, please?
So I'm gonna pull up some plans here on the monitor, and the control room's gonna help me out. Okay. So right here, sorry, not having a mouse makes this a little bit more difficult. But this is Lyndale Avenue here on the left side of the screen. Here's Lyndale Avenue. This is the proposed building. This is the drive-through. It's kind of a loop over here. 66th Street is down below the bottom of the screen right now. The trash building is proposed for up here, north of the drive-through. And I will scroll through a little bit farther. We do have some elevations. The trash building will largely be disguised. There's a plant wall. Sorry, excuse me while I scroll through all of these. Here we go. So here, I'm going to zoom in on this side. Over here is what the trash enclosure, trash building will look like. There'll be, this is hard to maneuver. Here we go. So this is a bus shelter on one side. Here are some bike racks. There's this arching metal element. And then over here on the left side of this building is kind of a pocket park where they're proposing to move the family statue that is currently at the corner where the outdoor seating will go. So they'll move that up here. This wall that you're seeing here is one of the walls of the trash enclosure. The doors will face, the overhead doors will face the interior of the site, and the other side of the building will include kind of a trellis system and plantings. So from many sides of the building, you won't realize what it is. The other stipulations that are included in this trash building are that this building be heated, that it have its own water, that it have a floor drain, that all of the surfaces be cleanable, and it will actually have a stack on top of it to get those odors out of the area so they won't bother the people at the bus station, because that would be horrible, and that they won't bother the neighborhood. So that is a question for the management company, or Wellington Management.
Right now, we're having trash pickup usually done during the evening, just because of LA Fitness's hours. Trying to get a garbage truck in and out of there with that much parking, especially in the winter months, is pretty difficult.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I just had a question for Mr. Worst from Caribou. And this, it's maybe neither here nor there as far as our purposes, but it's just my own curiosity. There was a Caribou location just kitty corner at one time from this proposed location, right?
Yes.
And so I'm just curious what's going to make this one work or be feasible when that one perhaps wasn't.
Yeah, the location that you're referring to was closed, I think, about a year and a half ago, and it was closed due to lack of business, and that was primarily because there was no easy parking. There was also no drive-through, and it was just a very difficult place to get to. What makes a retail or a Caribou site successful typically is having some adjacent retail drivers where people don't have to work hard to get to the site. It's still, despite a lot of people loving the brand, it's still a convenience play.
Thank you.
Right, good.
Tom?
What would be the frequency of the trash pickup? How often?
It will depend on, the end users and how much they produce. It's probably going to be a minimum of 3 times a week, more likely 5 times a week, I would bet.
Allison? Do you have hours of operation for both units? Same hours, different hours, long?
The LA Fitness has probably the longest hours, followed. I haven't actually compared the hours between, Caribou and LA Fitness, but those two are both probably the longest hours of our retail operators.
Okay. The burger unit would be?
The burger unit will go later. I can't remember, Melissa, if they had asked for any variances for Richfield.
Yeah, I don't think any variances or any special stipulation or special requests were made. They're operating within our ordinance limits. They will be applying for a liquor license, and so they will look at beer and wine. The hours will be examined as part of that, but I don't recall what they are offhand.
Okay. And then relative to Caribou and the order sign and unit, what provisions have been looked at for sound from there? Sometimes those kinds of order stations, sound carries and so on, and we have a lot of buildings along there where sound is going to bounce off of.
Right.
Any anticipated problem with that?
We don't anticipate any problems. Again, our administrative review committee meeting has reviewed this application. The applicant's aware of our noise standards. This is well outside of the range where we restrict outside speaker boards and things like that. The residential properties are far enough away. But our noise ordinance is in place all the time. And so if there was a problem, we could address it.
Okay, another comment? Please state your name and address.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Brian Lamada. I live at the City Bella Complex, catty corner from the Lindale Station. Want to welcome Caribou back to the neighborhood. Just had a couple of, 2 questions. One, is there going to be outdoor music or outdoor seating at night? Our building has experienced problems with the champs. People get drunk at night, and then they get louder and louder and louder, and that's been an issue. And I'd like to know if that's going to be allowed at this new location, because we are very close. And then the second thing is, if the developer from Wellington could describe the nature of the other tenants that are proposed besides the burger place and the Caribou? I understand there is going to be other tenants. Thank you.
To answer, there will be outside seating, and again, the outside seating will be only during that time of year when people want to be outside. I don't remember, did we put stipulations on that as?
Right, the outdoor seating rules of the city prohibit live outdoor music, and then the noise ordinances will apply to any other piped-in outdoor music. I can't remember if it specifically restricts it based on hours, but there are provisions in the outdoor seating requirements that deal with music. In terms of folks being loud and outside, I guess my take on this one is that this is not a bar like Champs. It's a restaurant where folks, I don't expect the same kind of traffic at this restaurant as you get at Champs. I'm sorry, I forgot them. And actually, you know what, we can run back and get them for you. Otherwise, this item is on the council agenda in 2 weeks, and I will make sure to have them. I apologize for not having that tonight.
I don't. I haven't been negotiating the lease, so I don't. And then your second question. Oh. We don't have signed leases yet. We are talking to a franchise, hair cutting place that's well known. We're talking to a smaller electronic store. We have one other one that is kind of real tentative right now, which would be possibly a small dental office. It would be. We'll have probably at a minimum of 4, and we might have as many as 5, depending on how small or how large their spaces get. Correct.
Melissa, the Uptown My Burger location is 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Does something like that sound familiar?
That sounds
Yeah, I think
familiar. It's
they're
not
gonna
late. It's not a 2 a.m. It's definitely a midnight or earlier is what they were applying for. Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments?
Move we close the public hearing.
Thank you, Gordon. There's a second. Okay, it's a motion and a second to close. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Okay, and then the consideration of it. If could I have a motion? Or
So-
is there any, okay, go ahead.
Discussion.
So I move the approval of the resolution granting the approval of the major amendment to the final development plan and conditional use permit for the Lindale Station Plan Unit Development.
Is there a second? Okay, a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So I'm excited as well to see Caribou
I
come
could
back
tell,
to
but wait, how fast you said
that
that.
corner.
Yeah. It kind of just, wow.
Yeah.
And double espresso.
Yes,
So
exactly.
we got to vote on this first then for discussion, or second? You seconded.
Yes.
it.
There was a second. Yep, a second, so now is any discussion?
So,
Okay.
can I finish my discussion, Tom?
Sure. of
Okay.
course.
So, and I'm excited as well to see the totality of the vision arrive for this space when, I know it was one of the concerns for all of us and for council when the proposal originally came forward, and this little corner wasn't developed. I think it's nice to see it finally come into play, and it's nice to see as a sign of economic recovery. So when the original proposal came forward, they didn't have a tenant because development wasn't, there was no need for it at that time, and it's exciting to see it show up.
I second that emotion. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm really glad to see you're going to keep the statue. That's kind of a focal point in Richfield. It's been around a long time. And it's, believe it or not, there's a lot of controversy about it as far as who likes it, who doesn't like it. From the old timers, none of you young ones. Us old ones, there's been some talk about keeping it or not keeping it. And So I'm glad it's there.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. Good luck. Okay, last item on the public hearings is consider an amendment to the city's zoning ordinance that eliminates city-appointed hearing examiner positions and appoints the planning commission as the deciding body for variance applications beginning in 2015. Staff.
Thank you. City staff continually monitors, as you know, the zoning code for any ordinances that may require review. In this instance, staff has identified an administrative process within the code that's no longer necessary or efficient. In the 70s and 80s, there were years when the city was receiving and processing 35 or more variance applications per year. New homes and businesses were being built rapidly as the community filled in. The number of requests was so significant that the community decided to create a committee of hearing examiners to conduct variance requests alone, thereby allowing the Planning Commission to concentrate on short and long-term planning issues. Over the years, the number of variance requests has dropped significantly. Not only is this city now fully built up, but also Richfield has a history of proactively updating the zoning code to allow some flexibility and keep up with changing trends. This proactive approach is intended to allow reasonable accommodations and eliminate the need for many variances. Since 2010, there have been only 5 standalone variance applications. The Committee of Hearing Examiners is typically comprised of 2 residents appointed by the city manager and confirmed by the council. Hearing examiners serve a term of 2 years. In late 2013, appointed hearing examiner Paul Wasco resigned. Given that there are only 1 or 2 hearings per year, a replacement has not been appointed. Current hearing examiner Connie Murray's term expires at the end of 2014. Staff is proposing that following the expiration of Ms. Murray's term, consideration of variance requests be returned to the Planning Commission. A separate process is no longer necessary and seems inefficient. The proposed ordinance will give the Planning Commission the authority to approve and deny standalone variances only, and applicants will be able to appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council. The City Council will retain the authority to approve and deny variances that are applied for in conjunction with other applications. So, for instance, tonight's application for Fireside Pizza, it was an application for a conditional use permit and variances. The City Council will still make the final decision on those applications. The ordinance is attached. If you have any questions about the proposal or concerns, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Are there any questions from the commission?
Move we close the public hearing.
Very good.
Seconded.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then would you make a recommendation also to the proposal?
I recommend approval of the attached ordinance amendment, amending subsections, et cetera.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I've did take the time, a couple of instances over the years to attend a hearing with Mr. Wasco, and it was enlightening, and could tell that he really put a lot of work into it and a lot of thought. But variances just aren't there much anymore. So I can see the logic behind this.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. There is motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Okay, thank you. Okay, on to liaison reports, Community Services Advisory Commission.
Community Services, they are going to do all sorts of nice things in Veterans Park as far as the play equipment. There was a lot of discussion on that, and I'm pleased to report that they put a lot of thought into a multi-age appeal. There will be a zip line, climbing tower, and other fitness equipment that will apply to or be of interest, we hope, or they hope, to adolescent and tweeners. It's not just going to be little kids and adults. This was something that Mr. Topitzhofer presented to the council, and the council approved it. It's going to be at well over $100,000 in new play equipment. So they are doing some nice things. And I would like to make a point that it is not going to take up any additional green space in the park, but will be a nice addition.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. I saw those. It really looks like a fun time. Wish I was a kid again. Okay.
They'll have equipment for you too.
Yeah, I know they will. City Council update? None. Okay. HRA?
The July meeting was canceled, but 2 meetings ago, July 1st, they met to either approve or deny an HRA loan that was given. And it's my understanding, and I had this down for our last meeting, but I no longer have the piece of paper with my notes written down on it, that part of the loan was forgiven, but that the homeowner still had to pay some of what was left. So that was it.
Okay, Richfield School Board?
No report.
No report. Transportation Commission? Who has that? Chamber of Commerce?
So I do have a report for the chamber. If any of you were hoping at golfing at the chamber golf outing on September 9th, you've missed the boat. All of the golfing slots are gone. There are some sponsorship opportunities still available. The board did have a planning retreat that was at the International Dairy Queen headquarters in Edina, and had the CEO come in and visit, and had an outside consultant help facilitate that. Angie, the chamber president, attended the Minnesota Chamber Mini Institute in St. Cloud. Lake Winds Food Co-op, which recently opened, will be having their ribbon cutting soon. Their quote is, "After the dust settles." Angie was accepted into the Minnesota Chamber's leadership program, and a couple of local businesses have stepped up to offset the tuition, but I think more contributors are desired. There are a couple of good after-hours programs that are being well attended, and we think the 4th of July committee, or the Chamber of Commerce thinks the 4th of July committee did an outstanding job on setting up the 4th of July program. And there are a couple of new opportunities for businesses to get involved with the chamber locally, and some inexpensive advertising. Check out the chamber website. I've actually got a really long list, but rather than prolong an already long meeting, chamber website has lots of detail on the other events that have happened in the community.
Thank you. Susan, I'm sorry, did you have anything for the transfer? Nothing, okay, very good. Just checking. Any other? City planners report.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the next meeting. The August 25th meeting will officially be canceled. We had an application, but they're actually going to delay until September and continue working on their application. For tonight's meeting, we ended up bumping the annual bike/walk tour. In looking at rescheduling that, one of the options is August 25th. Something that I thought might come up with that is that anyone with children, that is likely the day your children start school. And so it might not be ideal for folks. Then we considered the second meeting, or second Monday in September, which now might be a study session for Holy Angels. It's one of those possible dates. So my proposal is actually to skip the bike and walk tour this year, unless someone has a great idea for an area that we haven't toured recently. You know, I'm feeling that we're a little bit in a rut with our biking and walking tours, and I don't have a good idea for a tour. If someone has a great one, I'd be happy to keep trying to find a date that will work. But if not, perhaps we wait a year and maybe do the 77th Street corridor next year. Let's see what happens with the tunnel. Mitsubishi Honda is going up now. Are there objections to that?
As far as I'm concerned, that sounds great to cancel to next year. Anybody?
Okay.
No, we're fine.
Sounds good.
I think we're
Okay.
fine, yeah.
So the official cancellation for August 25th will go out, but you can mark it on your calendars. Our next regular meeting will be the September meeting, and we're still working on that study session date, with the council for Holy Angels.
Since we're not going to have a
Okay,
meeting
Tom?
in September or August, or no, August, I'd like to remind people that Open Streets at Penfest is a go on September 21st. So we will still have that going on.
Okay, very good. Anything else?
I just wanted to remind folks to vote tomorrow. There's a primary election happening, and the state, I know, is hoping to beat their previous turnout in the last gubernatorial primary of 9%. So I think if all of us voted, we could probably top that.
Yeah, it's
Very good.
passed, but I used the city facility here Saturday, actually, after our meeting. I just walked over and took care of voting like that. It was great.
Great.
They're set up for it, and they do a very
Excellent.
good job.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else? Hearing none?
So moved.
Boy.
Seconded for an adjournment.
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.